the folks who are making these allegations that the degree is dead, they all literally come with multiple degrees from the most elite places. So that's number one. Number two, and then I promise I will answer the question. Number two is they come from it. And the notion that let's not have a degree. Okay, the one question I'd ask is that what you're promoting to your own children? Sounds like an other people's child perspective.
Welcome to the Academic Boardroom. This is a podcast where we sit down with power brokers shaping the future of education. I'm your host, Dr. Eli Joseph, and joining me is my colleague and partner in crime, Dr. Janice Gassam Asare. Today, we have a special guest, Dean Angie Kamath at the New York University School of Professional Studies, and she is recognized as a great power broker. And she operates at a vital intersection between industry demand and economic mobility. Her professional background is uniquely suited to addressing the current shift in higher education due to her extensive leadership experience. She oversaw the New York City Department of Small Business Services, Workforce Career Centers, and prior to joining NYU, Dean Angie served as a university dean, continuing education and workforce programs at the City University of New York. All right, so I wanted to jump right into this conversation and talk about this issue that we have, right? Due to AI and the evolution of technology, we have this problem in education that there's an erosion of this academic shield, and I wanted to get your perspective on that observation, but also I want you to touch base on what you're doing as a dean and as a leader here at NYU to combat this erosion of academic shield.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Janice, Dr. Eli, thank you so much for having this really important conversation. I appreciate it. It's timely and um, it's not an uncomplicated issue, right? One can get a perspective by reading the headlines, and then when you actually like dig into the data, it can tell kind of any story you want. So, I
Mhm.
appreciate the opportunity to kind of shed some light on what we're seeing here at New York University. And I'd say, at least for my professional career, I have been some people might call me a workforce nerd or a workforce obsessive, but really thinking about what are those signals? What are those proxies for skills, for getting hired, for having kind of a shield of sorts. So I
Mhm.
really love this notion of the academic shield and how we can redefine it to protect that next generation of professionals. So I'd say a few things. The academic shield of education, I still always go back to it is the one tried and true way to have lifetime earnings that are significantly higher than other levels of education. And we absolutely see that unemployment gap kind of completely, nearly coming zero
Yes.
between the high school graduate and the college grad. But I do think that that body of evidence in terms of lifetime earnings is real, and I don't know that
Mhm.
there's going to be that much erosion to that. So I'll say that. But you ask a really important question here. And so, our philosophy at the School of Professional Studies, we're one of 15 schools within the New York University network. We're a large school, we have about 15,000 students, is to really think about education in terms of doses of education. And I use that term. I often think about education as really the analogies to the healthcare area are profound. I mean, sometimes you take education because you need it. Maybe you're transferring or you're transitioning or looking to pivot in one's career. Sometimes you need a specialist. You want to get a really specialized degree. Sometimes you want to explore and kind of understand options around prevention. So you might take a pre-college course. You might kind of dabble in a few different areas. But at the end of the day, I use this healthcare analogy because I think what's most important for higher ed to continue to be value add, to continue to show these lifetime earnings differentials is to dose out education,
Mhm.
not just in degrees, but dose it out in certifications, dose it out in terms of courses, dose it out in terms of reskilling at different points in one's life. What we know, and we're part of a collective with the Stanford University and their Center for Longevity, as well as other partners in higher ed, are really talking about a learning society, moving from a school to society where you go to school at age 18 and then you enter the workforce and you never go to school again, to a learning society. where you have learning in doses at different points in time, because that's actually how life works, right?
Mm.
You work, you change jobs, you have families, you deal with kind of your responsibilities, you may be in or out of the workforce, you change jobs, you change pivots, you change sectors. We have to have learning available at different points in time for different types of people at different kind of levels.
Mhm.
And so that's, I think, the most important part of that academic shield is having different opportunities for folks to kind of come in and out of education at affordable rates in doses that make sense, that are attuned to the need of a career transitioner, that are attuned to the need of an explorer, they're attuned to the need of someone who's looking to advance. Those are all really different objectives, and good higher ed can meet people where they're at. There's a lot of higher ed that can't. They're
Mhm.
a little stuck in a model, but we really try at the School of Professional Studies to think about education as something that's lifelong, something that comes in the dose of a degree, something that comes in the dose of a course, something that comes in the dose of a certification, something that comes as a senior leader, something that comes when you're in high school, and kind of everything in between.
I appreciate that. What I enjoy about teaching here at NYU is that obviously everyone has a diverse set of skill sets. They come in and they're willing to learn and they're ready to learn as well. But I enjoy what you said here because it's not traditional. It's more so I like that, I like to use the technology term of subscribe. Like
Mhm,
you're subscribing to an education rather
mhm,
than just enrolling,
mhm.
and you're just signing up for 4 years.
Right.
But here it's different because it's more so of okay, you have 4 years, or you can have 3.5 years, or you can have 30 years here.
Mhm,
I really appreciate that, and I guess it's more so of the new climate here, right? And do you believe that universities can successfully pivot to a subscriber focused model where students don't just graduate, but maintain a lifelong membership to sync their skills with new technology triggers. And I'm pretty sure you have
mhm.
much experience doing that here at NYU.
Yeah,
Do you think that's a,
totally.
a good a good model?
So there's so many interesting trends that are going on right now. So 150%, Eli, in terms of that lifelong learning and kind of being able to kind of come in and out. Sometimes to use the analogy, sometimes you're suspending your
Mhm.
subscription. Sometimes it's just kind of always there, almost as a hedge, as an
Mhm.
insurance. You're turning it on. You're kind of, amping up
Mhm.
your membership to premium. Sometimes you're going down to basic. I think it's a really apt and smart analogy for what good education could look like. Um, is it possible? It is absolutely possible. I'm in a cohort of other deans of schools of professional studies from across the country, Canada, UK, and I would say again, maybe it's self-selected. It's kind of an Ivy Plus group,
Mhm.
but our programs are all indisputably growing. And I've been
Mhm.
with this group for about 5 years. They're changing. Some programs have been a little bit more dependent on international, but they're all growing. And in places like Oxford and Cambridge, the micro credential, the kind of idea of having kind of short form, very affordable, if not free training, has grown substantially. Who would have thought these universities that were, started nearly 1,000 years ago would get into this business? And they are. So I have a lot of faith that nimble, entrepreneurial, higher ed, which describes a lot of us, is able to get there. When I talk to folks like Ted Mitchell from the association, the American Council for Education, excuse me, ACE, you know, there's a rhetoric that higher ed, the degree is dead. There's a rhetoric that it's out of touch with industry. But when you talk to Ted and his members, the majority of higher ed in this country is public higher ed. The majority of students are actually in public higher ed. They're deep in communities. They could be in rural communities, they could be suburban communities, they could be in urban communities. They need to be responsive to their community stakeholders and their businesses as a matter of survival. So they don't see themselves in this narrative that we often hear that the degree is dead or the
Mhm.
degree is obsolete. Because I think for so much, but there is a coastal higher ed
Mhm.
elite perception, if not reality problem. So I'm not putting my head in the sand, but just to say, I actually think the majority of higher ed that's kind of very kind of publicly funded, that's in communities, is very responsive and has something akin to the subscriber model.
Mhm.
In terms of, there's lots of types of higher ed. And I would say this cohort that I'm telling you about of 2025 colleges that includes the Ivy Plus, and they're doing this as well.
Mhm.
So it's not everyone. But I do think that what do universities need to do? I think that they have to listen to their alumni. I think they have to listen to employers. What's interesting about this moment, I just came off of a retreat with a lot of chief human resource officers late last week. And because of this AI moment, the learning and development teams, the internal training teams that I think for many companies have been dormant for a very long time. There's been a big disinvestment, right, in the learning and development arms historically since the kind of 70s. It's now up and running, right? Because there's so many changes happening to business models that you can't outsource it. You can't
Mhm.
buy it. You're looking to build it. So, yes, should higher ed be more subscriber based? Absolutely. That goes back to kind of the dose of it's a better way. I think it's a more eloquent way of
Yeah.
saying that the dose of education needs to be kind of modulated. I also think that education is going to be happening more and more in the workplace, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
That's a really good thing from an affordability perspective. That's a good thing from an investment perspective. And I don't think that means the death of higher ed. I just think that, you go to a specialist sometimes, you go to a generalist sometimes, you want to get training in-house. Not every employer can afford to have a big learning and development
Mhm.
arm, but for the big ones, I think they will. And I think that's great training ground for students, for employees, for workers.
I agree. I agree.
So I want to jump in because you brought up some really great points, Dean Angie. So I'm curious about your thoughts about, we've heard so much about this idea that the degree is dead. And I think, you know, as Dr. E and I are both, have our doctorates, I think we're biased. We have some interesting biases that we come into the conversation with, but I'm curious about your perspective regarding the value of the degree. We've heard a lot of these huge, um, these well known business entrepreneurs saying that degrees no longer matter and that people should not be focused on degrees, but should be focused on specific skills. And I know you also being the dean, you come in with your perspective, but what are your thoughts on how the value of the degree has changed over the last few decades?
Yep. And so I smirk a little bit because down to a person, the folks who are making these allegations that the degree is dead, they all literally come with multiple degrees from the most elite places. So that's number one. Number two, and then I promise I will answer the question. Number two is they come from it. And the notion that let's not have a degree. Okay. The one question I'd ask is that what you're promoting to your own children? Sounds like an other
Exactly.
people's child perspective. I feel really strongly about that. What will I say to answer your question? What has been, at least from my observation, the evolving value of a degree? One of my favorite books in this space came out last year. It's called Hacking College. And I think it does a really good job to make the case. And it was the authors were both a journalist and then a leader in higher ed, I think, at the University of Minnesota. And Hacking College, the thesis is it actually doesn't matter what you study, but college is transformative for exploration, for the experience, for the confidence building, for the ability to problem solve, for the ability to figure out what you are awesome at, what gets you in your flow, what gives you energy, what brings you, what comes easy to you, and then to learn what you're less good at. That's what you do in college. And so hacking college is go for it's don't go for the popular majors. Don't feel like to have a great career path, you must be a computer science major. It is go to college and figure out what you're good at. And that might actually mean if you are a bilingual Spanish speaker, it might be specializing or majoring in Spanish literature because A, it's going to come maybe a little bit easier to you. And B, it's something that actually is going to teach you all those skills in a way that's not gonna demoralize you because you're getting B's and C's. The book talks about a prototypical student who wanted to always be in business. They took their first accounting course and they didn't do really well, and they came away with the conclusion that I can't have a career in business if I can't even pass an accounting course. Terrible conclusion, not the point of college. So what would I say to that? I think college is about transformation, about learning, thinking what you're good at, what you're not good at, what brings you joy, what brings you frustration. The second piece is it's really important to line up experiences. So I believe, and again, we have it within our school, and lots of places have required work experience, required internships, required work based learning as part of the degree. I think it's a disservice to students to not really push the application of the learning into a workplace during those 4 years of college. That still might be controversial in some areas. I'm not saying every degree should have a work requirement, but we do know kind of before COVID, certainly exacerbated by COVID, getting internships is hard.
Oh yeah.
Really hard. In a hybrid workplace, it's hard to get managers who are showing up every day in a summer to support and mentor students. So this notion of applied, work-based learning, experiential learning, required or kind of strongly encourage internships as part of the degree program, that's a really important part of where we should be going. The evolving nature of higher ed, I appreciate a lot of Joe Fuller's research from Harvard Business School that cited that documented degree inflation, that it is also a travesty that jobs that really, quite frankly, probably don't require a bachelor's or a master's degree, maybe doesn't even require an associate degree, now have the expected education to be at least a bachelor's degree plus some experience. There is absolutely degree inflation, and I think that that's a nature of rising cost of
Mhm.
living, about jobs, about applicants, about applicant tracking systems and AI in the hiring process. I don't think that means that higher ed is at fault for degree inflation, but I absolutely can hold those two truths that a degree is valuable and there's absolutely degree inflation. So I love the movement to sort of have employers really look at the actual skill and job requirements and understand, does that take a high school diploma? Does that take an associate degree? Could that just take a bachelor's degree and not a master's degree? I think that that scrutiny, being under a microscope never feels good, but that scrutiny I think is really healthy to have that conversation. Again, I just don't think that the conclusion is the degree is dead. Um, I'd say the last trend, Janice, that I'd like to highlight in terms of just the evolution of the value of the degree is affordability. That's a real thing. Americans who are frustrated with the cost of the degree, it's less maybe frustration with the cost of the degree, it's frustration with the ROI. I have a colleague who says the most important time in college is actually the 12 months after graduation when you're looking for a degree. And that's what people are frustrated with. I don't think that they're frustrated with the degree, with the transformational experience, with the knowledge, with the networks, with the social capital building. I think they're pretty upset that you could go into debt, that you could spend a lot of money, maybe not go into debt, but have that opportunity cost and not land that job. That you get a bachelor's degree and you're still working in retail, or you get a bachelor's degree and you're working in food service and you have debt. And so that is a problem. And I think that affordability needs to be scrutinized. I think that the good news is that's out of 4,000 uh, institutions of higher ed in the US, many, like I said earlier, are public and they're affordable and they are huge. Raj Chetty has done research to suggest that that is the hugest at scale engine of economic mobility in terms of going from the kind of bottom quintiles of economic classification to kind of the top two. That's important. So again, different types of education for people. We're really proud at SPS that our associate's degree, for example, are free for Pell and TAP eligible students. Our bachelor's degrees are heavily discounted and are on par with a public education in New York State. So we're all doing our part. But just to say, there's lots of options out there. But again, I think that the experience or the models of coastal elite
Mhm.
institutions sort of dominate and like, gosh, there's only 20 of them, right? So, what about the other 3,980? And so that's, I think, an important part that probably all of us as being in the kind of education, that's our bias, which is we're not one thing, we're actually many things, most of which are many of which are working and most of which are pretty responsive.
Yeah, I have a follow Dr. Yeah, I gotta
No,
you
go
said so
ahead.
much. I have a follow-up
Go
actually,
ahead.
because we mentioned I know that there's so much frustration with especially Gen Z who are coming out of college, and you said the 12 months after you graduate are such a
Mhm.
critical period. I think, another curveball that has been thrown into the picture is AI.
Mhm.
And I know a lot of people when they enter, either to get their bachelor's degree or their master's degree, because a lot of people can't find jobs. So, like, let me just go back to school. They're looking for careers and degrees, I guess, that are AI proof. And I,
Mhm.
I don't know if there's any fields that are AI proof fully, but how I'm so curious, as the dean, how do you think you all are equipping the students to navigate this job market, right? Whether they are earning their bachelor's or they're getting, higher degrees, it's just difficult out here for everyone. So I'm curious about this idea of how you prepare the students for what is happening right now as far as AI's quote unquote stealing all the jobs.
Yeah, really important point, and I'm spending a lot of time with students, with our faculty, kind of talking about these strategies and just kind of rolling up our sleeves and getting pragmatic. So here's a couple things, kind of looking at the data. So we've had a historical 95% of our students at School of Professional Studies and broadly, I think at NYU, but 95% are in jobs within 6 months of graduation or grad school. Really great stat. Last year, we just recently got last year's numbers. It has declined slightly, 92, 91, 92%. So I think the first piece is, and last year, arguably, I think people felt the same way, right? In terms of AI was absolutely a very real thing. The job market, the uncertainty, the landscape were all kind of out there for last year's grads. And so the fact that they maybe dropped by kind of 2, 3 percentage points, that's important data. And so that's what I say to students, which is, has it gotten harder? I don't know that it's gotten easier. I don't know that I would say it's gotten seismically harder. It's gotten more complicated. And so let me spend a minute on the kind of the complicated part. I over the past, I'd say 4 or 5 months, I probably have changed my perspective from there might be some AI proof jobs to I don't think that there's any AI proof job. And so there's some really good research that came out recently from Deloitte. It's a report from 2026 on like the enterprise level impact of AI. It was a survey of about well over 3,000 CEOs. And I've been citing this research because I think it's really interesting. Basically, of these CEOs that they said the companies fall into 3 categories. So the leadership models, the CEOs, their perspective, their strategy fall into 3 categories around AI. I think this is critically important for students to know. About a third of businesses are just interested in AI for efficiency. So frankly, how can I use AI to automate more tasks to ultimately lead to cost savings? That's what efficiency is, right? And so a third of companies out there are probably slowing up on hiring because they just wanna know how to do work quicker, faster, with less people power and more technological power. Okay. That's probably not gonna be the place where our students are gonna be getting jobs. One third of the employers surveyed said, "We're interested in productivity. We're gonna keep the same workforce. We can't not hire at entry level because that's our bench. That's our succession planning. We would be foolish to not hire that entry level, but let's hire talent that understands productivity, how to do, more, how to get into more lines of business, how to have smarter campaigns, how to drive more growth out of, similar product lines or kind of pivot to adjacent spaces." That's kind of exciting. And so we have a responsibility to make sure that our students know how to do work more efficiently, but also how to do more work more productively. Those companies are hiring, right? And then the third category is companies that are just sort of saying, wow, we can use agentic solutions and we can really just change and transform jobs and the workforce and our products and the customer experience. Those might often be kind of in a startup mode or kind of companies that are really nimble. But those companies are both hiring and they're looking for really creative solutions with AI. So when I talk to our students, we're sort of like, okay, know that not every company, actually, two-thirds of companies are not looking to kind of just stop the hiring or cut out people. They're looking to use AI to grow and transform. So let's start looking at companies that are kind of falling into that domain. And then I'd say the last piece that I find to be kind of really interesting around this kind of AI piece and how we're preparing our students is every single student, and we were about to graduate 2,000 students in our school alone. I will say if we asked every single student, "Have you learned AI in your class?" The answer is yes. If we ask those students, "Have you learned a skill that you think could be transferable to a job?" They should say yes.
Mhm.
If we ask them kind of, "Have you heard from leaders, businesses across different industries on their applications and perspectives on AIs?" They will say yes. And so that exposure is really important. And we're constantly just giving our students both the applied learning, like learn the tool, apply it in assignments, and then meet people who are grappling with this. The world is, I mean, every 60 days, it seems like there's like a new seismic shift.
Mhm.
So it's hard to master all of this. but I will continue to return back until I see better research or
Mhm.
see different activity. But that makes sense to me. A third are looking to cut costs, a third are looking to be more productive, a third are looking to transform. And so I'm going to hold on to that and help our students try to find those employers that fall into those kind of top two categories, because I think that that's where they can provide value as digital natives and they can really help those companies answer those questions.
As far as the lifelong support, I want to talk about that here at NYU. I think we do a good job of providing that hand
Mhm,
that helps students not only like at orientation while they're going to school,
mhm.
at graduation, but beyond graduation. You extend that hand, that help that students need, so that way they feel supported. As far as as a dean, do you think more universities, I think universities should be applying this philosophy, but do you think universities should stay plugged in a student's career 5, 10, 15 years
Mm.
from graduation?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And so you might have gathered this from my interview podcast style. I give really long answers to
No, you're
short
good. No, you're
questions.
good.
But, I got in where my mind went to from that question, Eli, is I got into this field. I was writing my first semester at grad school, and Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone, came out, and the whole notion of social capital. And it just it just kind of blew my mind in terms of how important that network is. And then, we always hear I think it's 85, the two stats I tell students all the time, 80 to 85% of jobs are accessed through networks, and about 70% of jobs are invisible,
Mm.
meaning they're there in the mind of the hiring manager before they're there on the Indeed.com
Yeah,
or whatever the
LinkedIn, yeah.
platform is. And so meeting people, getting into that mind's eye of that manager or mentor is critically important, given that most job postings or jobs that are required are kind of invisible,
Mhm.
right? They kind of show up, but they get kind of filled quite quickly. And so when I think about that lifelong hand, the helping hand,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
support
yeah.
network, the safety net, however you want to think about it, it absolutely has to be something that we put resources into for our students, so long as social capital is how people will ultimately get jobs that are both invisible and visible. We absolutely, as university systems, have to continue to build that social capital fabric and that safety net for all of our students. Will all of them need it or want it? Maybe not. Will all of them use it? Maybe not. But a safety net, I would think in general, the whole notion of you don't always actually want to use it, but you want to know it's there,
Yeah.
right? And so that's to me what that kind of lifelong hand is of join the alumni network, have an ability to tap into people who have graduated from your program who are out in the world, have an ability to kind of get coaching or kind of have conversations with faculty. Critically important. And so I have really appreciated the recognition. Also, I think Julia Friedland, I think also out of Harvard and the Christensen Institute, has done great research on strong and weak ties. And strong ties are kind of your family network, the folks that your people that you go to when you need help with the big stuff. Your weak ties are people who you know a little
Mhm,
bit, maybe not a lot. The weak ties is where you get jobs. The weak
mhm,
ties where you span generations. The weak ties are where you span industries. The weak ties are where you actually just need someone sparking a conversation to say, "Oh, I read an article about this. You might want to hear about that." Or here's a friend who sounds similar to you. So that notion of how do we develop more weak ties? How do we have more of the social network? I think good universities are gonna make those investments. Smart universities are gonna make those investments, and going back to maybe our very first
mhm,
question on how do we think about the lifelong learning? How do we think about dosing of education? I think if you do a good job providing that safety net, any school, public, private, big, small, in the US or global, if you provide that trusted safety net, that, if there's trust, that's who you're gonna go back to when you're in that moment to say, I need some skills in visualization. I need some AI skills. You're gonna go to the NYU website, or you're gonna go to the CUNY website, or you're gonna go to the Howard website, or you're gonna go to the Purdue website and type in the skill that you're looking to build, and you're gonna go to your trusted network, right? And so that seems like a really smart business strategy. It seems maybe like a luxury for
mhm.
the universities that can afford it. but I would say it will pay off in dividends from this lifelong learning strategy about being a trusted partner and then being that trusted partner when people need it, who they go back to. And, we all know the stats that skills, it goes back, Janice, to your question on how the value of the degree has changed over time. I think when skills had a shelf life of 20 years, the value of the degree was like the form and dose of education you needed. Now, when skills apparently become obsolete like every 3 to 7 years, it's not that the degree was not valuable. It's just simply you need to go and get more. It doesn't mean that the base of education that you received was bunk. It just means that you need to continually add on to that. And that's no one's fault. That's just technology change and sophistication and maturity of industries. But I think sometimes folks are like, well, if the original training was really good, maybe I didn't need more education. And that's like literally just not how the labor market and skill development works. So again, there's a lot of feelings out there, but I think we all want the same thing. We want an ROI. We want hard work to be rewarded. We want investments to pay off. And so, there's work to be done on all sides.
There are so many things. I was first going to ask you. Well, I'll maybe save it for later about alumni networks and things. But I'm so curious because you brought up this idea of skills and ensuring that the students that come out of school have skills that are well suited for what people are
Mhm.
looking for in these jobs that they're hiring for. And so I'm so curious because one of the things that frustrates me about academia is that whenever I'm teaching, I'm always often expected to teach out of these textbooks that
Mm.
are already super outdated. They were written years prior. And so the students are getting sort of like information that's behind. And that's not always accurate. But even like the things that you learn in those 4 years or those 2 years that you are in school or however long it takes for you to earn the degrees, a lot of those things might not be up to date. So how do you ensure that the skills that students are learning are not obsolete by the time that they earn their degrees?
Yeah, really important question. And I'd say the way I think about it is, I don't want this to sound kind of too wonky or technical, but there is, a whole set of like those enduring, durable human skills like communication, teamwork, leadership, time management, ability to kind of communicate both kind of written and writing. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh, writing, listening is a skill. Like those are all skills that you get in courses and classes by being in teamwork. There's actual science behind many of
Mhm.
those. You can take lots of courses in all of those. I haven't seen a listening course yet, but I feel like there probably is a
Yeah, there's
communications course
probably
that
yeah,
really
of course.
hones in on listening. And then there's the technical skills. The technical skills, I think, Janice, is what you're absolutely rightly sort of saying. How do we make sure that we are exposing students to enough that have durability, exposing students to enough skills that, will help them land a job, exposing students to kind of the foundations of those skills, even if the platform or whatnot changes. Um, so I separate out the world of skills into the kind of human enduring skills and the kind of technical skills. Technical skills will always change and probably be outmoded. You're right, probably for some areas by the time they graduate, but I don't think most. I mean, I've always, in my very first job in government, I had a technology team, and we'd always come up with, these ideas, and they'd be like, "Okay, you know that paper and pencil is a technology, right? Like a tech solution
Mhm.
isn't the technical solution isn't always the answer. You have to have the underlying strategy. They hammered me. They're like, what's your vision? What's the strategy? What are you trying to do? What's the problem solving? What's the problem that you're trying to solve for? So a good education gives you those ability to inquire, to have that kind of, sense of inquiry, have that sense of listening, and then like go to some technical solution that will probably change. But I feel like that's a really important balance to say out loud to students that you have to develop both. That if you are just going after kind of a set of kind of hard skills, that's a really risky gambit
Mhm.
gamble that you are, playing around with. And so that's something to think about. I mean, the other piece is, I mean, Thankfully, we've got open ed resources that make textbooks kind of no cost or low cost for students. So that's an important piece. What really gets my goat is the $200 textbook that's outmoded. Oh, that's like the worst on top of the worst, Janice. But the important piece is we believe in our education. I think the education science, the learning science is on our side. That experiential and applied learning is the way to go. It's how human brains kind of both process and learn kind of very effectively. And so we use the case study methodology. We use actual work-based learning. One of our favorite sets of courses are called real-world courses. Again, we're very pragmatic at the School of Professional Studies. We are plain English, and the real-world courses are based on real-world current problems that C-suite executives in Fortune 500 and kind of brand name entities are experiencing, and they want a Gen Z perspective on the solution. And so those are really popular courses for us because they are giving you an internship-like experience. They're giving you skill development. They're giving you a portfolio of problems that you've solved that you can then take and kind of understand the analog to apply that solution to another context. So that's how we think about it. But there's no denying, when I was in college, I was a business and finance major, and I learned it was like this was before like the World Wide Web. It's so embarrassing to say out loud.
It's okay.
It was before like the internet, and I used Lotus Notes. It was like the very beginning days of
Wow.
Excel,
Yeah.
and that's how I learned kind of how to data crunch. And so just to say, like, I was never really good at Lotus Notes. I certainly don't use it. I never used it after college, but like I learned the fundamentals, and like I'm pretty good at Excel now. And so the things will change. They always will change. Like by definition, we want them to change. But if we get the fundamentals, that's what we should be focusing in on. Yeah.
Gotcha. As far as when we look into the future, and I know you don't have much time left, so we let's look into the future. Um, do you feel confident that um, our our school or even in the American system, we're heading in the right direction with the ability to remain the primary engine for skills verification?
hmm Really very, very important. So my answer to this, I'll look internally and then in terms of our own school, the
Yeah.
School of Professional Studies here at NYU, and then more broadly. We were founded in the Great Depression. We were founded in 1934, 92 years ago. And I would argue our vision has remained extremely constant, though we are unrecognizable today from when we started in the middle of the Great Depression. And what our vision has always been is we are a school for individuals who want education to advance themselves, period. Whatever your state, stature, job, income level, we have never cared, not in 1934, not in 2026. If you are a curious, active learner and you want to advance your knowledge, your job, your economic situation, you've got a place for us. And we create our tuition and our doses of education in ways that are accessible and affordable. That style of education will always be in vogue. That's our vision statement to kind of, help people through education economically advance. Our mission statement, our commitment, our promise to students is we are going to guide you to thrive in the real world. We're going to guide our students to thrive in the real world. I don't think I'm particularly unique in that kind of commitment to students. I think there are a lot of higher ed. I think that that's a winning combo. The fact that I used to teach radio broadcasting,
Uh,
when FDR started his fireside chats, literally, we trained some of the first radio broadcasters in America.
wow.
That is clearly not something we are doing today, but the idea that what's the emerging technology and how do we train people because they're good family sustaining jobs or people can have choice filled lives. That's what motivates us. That's what's behind new ideas, new programs, new skill development, new offerings. If you have that sense, and I think a lot of higher ed in this country has that sensibility of let's just be really practically minded and know where the jobs are and know how we have to adapt to the skills, I think you're good as gold. I think in terms of the future and thinking about skill verification, I think we have to work even more closely with employers. And this has been such a challenge throughout my career, I would say, Eli, in terms of getting the attention of employers to work with higher ed. We work at different places, but honestly, I don't think that we're slower or faster. Like we just work in different rhythms.
Mhm.
and different places. The most honest, I think, industry leaders that I have had the pleasure and privilege of working with tell me they don't have a crystal ball. They wish they had a crystal ball to know what skills would be in demand in 3 or 5 years. Most of them are looking 2, 3 quarters ahead. Most of them are looking right in the horizon. They're looking at their billable hours, they're looking at their portfolio, and they're trying their best, but they don't know. And so I think we need to work more closely with employers as they're navigating a lot of these technology changes. I think as they're building their learning and development arms, we have to figure out what can they do internally, what can we do. If there's a big, larger internal learning development and training arm that corporations are building, I'd love that to be translatable and legible to us in the academy so that we can learn from that, we can mimic that, we can augment that, we could either go before or after that training so we're not duplicating it. So I do see a future where we have to figure out how to work better with industry, and I would give us, like, I don't know, C plus B
That's a fair assessment.
as an industry in terms of really working with business as an industry. As a school, I think we do a better job than that.
Yeah.
But I think if we're gonna, bump up and think about the future of talent in this country, we have to do a better job between these sectors in an authentic way. And it's not about I think there has been a lot of blaming of higher ed, you're not
Mhm.
doing your job, or businesses, why aren't
Mhm.
you investing in your people?
Yeah.
And I think we just have to get past that and kind of share the responsibility.
Wow. So we appreciate you, Dean Angie, for coming on board
I appreciate your
and
great
bringing this.
questions. This is an important,
Yeah, we
timely
could talk
topic.
to you forever.
Yeah.
I feel the
Thank you
same.
for joining us on the inaugural episode.
My
Thank you so
pleasure.
much.
My pleasure. Really
Thank you so much.
privileged to be with you guys, and I appreciate the work that you're doing. And I hope that these conversations continue to take traction and lead to some changes in how folks are operating and kind of getting past the status quo.
Thank you so much. This is the Academic Boardroom, and we are signing out.